In this final video about jazz, we look at important jazz musicians around the world. As has been the case with the last few videos, there are some questions at the end that will help you review for the jazz exam. As alluded to earlier, for the first half of the 20th century, jazz was heard as America's greatest contribution to world music. It was particularly popular in France from the 1910s onward. Two Europeans who made their mark through their group, Le Quintet du Hot Club de France, were Django Reinhardt and Stéphane Grappelli. We've already talked a bit about Reinhardt, who became a virtuoso jazz guitarist even with two paralyzed fingers on his left hand. Stéphane Grappelli was the jazz violinist with whom he collaborated for most of his career. Listen to their version of I Saw Stars. We've already talked about Latin jazz in the 1950s. In the 60s and 70s, one of the biggest names in Latin jazz was Tito Puente. Born in Spanish Harlem to Puerto Rican parents, Puente took up percussion at an early age. After serving in World War II, he completed his education at the Juilliard School, where he received a good education in music theory and conducting. His album Dance Mania was a hit, and it's very representative of Puente's style. His style is strongly rooted in Afro-Caribbean and Afro-Cuban dance rhythms such as the son, mamba, and the cha-cha. Listen also to his Oye Como Va, and that's a tune we'll encounter again as it is covered later on by Santana. Jazz had spread to urban and better developed areas of Africa by the 1930s, but it became much more popular after 1956, when the U.S. State Department started sponsoring tours of jazz musicians from the United States to Africa. These were musicians such as Duke Ellington and Dizzy Gillespie and others. Miriam Makeba, sometimes known as Mama Africa for her efforts towards civil rights for all, started her career in the 1950s with a South American jazz group. She then formed her own all-female group that sang a mix of jazz and traditional African melodies, and that's a pretty good example of what you have on your listening guide. She made her name in South Africa with the song Pata Pata, and it was about the Pata Pata dance, and it came out in 1957. About 10 years later, it was released in the United States, and it peaked at number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart and at number 7 on the Billboard R&B chart. Jazz came to Japan via the American presence in the Philippines. Once in Japan, it established strong roots. Today, you might hear anything from Dixieland to what the Japanese call new jazz. Listen to Sadao Watanabe's rendition of Charlie Parker's tune Confirmation. Watanabe was a saxophone player just like Parker was. Then also check out a bit of anime music on your YouTube playlist. Jazz strongly influenced the soundtrack for the late 90s anime series Cowboy Bebop. Yoko Kanno and the Seatbelts did the opening sequence called Tank. The music of American jazz guitarist and composer Pat Metheny incorporates a broad range of stylistic influences, one of which is Latin jazz. This can be heard in Better Days Ahead from 1989. It's available on your playlist. Much like the French, the Scandinavians embraced jazz from its earliest days. Recent years have heard increasingly eclectic and postmodern approaches to style and improvisation. There are few better examples of this than the tune How High the Loch, Ornamentology. It's from an album entitled Music of the Hebrides by the Norwegian group called The Farmer's Market. In this recording, the group brings together the bagpipe drones of the Hebrides with the fast tempos and complexity of bebop, plus a little bit of Eastern European accordion playing, in their takeoff of the tune How High the Moon. Read more about the piece at your listening guide. The most contemporary musical example of jazz we'll be listening to this semester is that of a jazz pianist of a new generation. His name is Eldar Djangirov, and he was born in Kyrgyzstan, which was part of the former Soviet Union. Djangirov was discovered at age 9 at a festival in Siberia. He then immigrated with his family to the United States. Since that time, jazz greats from pianist Chick Corea to pianist Dave Brubeck have recommended his command of jazz techniques and his musicality. Listen to his rendition of the Frank Sinatra favorite Fly Me to the Moon in the listening guide on your course website. Much about his approach is traditional. Still, his ability to give old traditions new life is striking. With this example from 2005, we come to the end of our videos about jazz. We have seen that jazz has taken on diverse styles and forms over its history, and especially in the last 50 years. As we move forward into the 21st century, let us hope that jazz creativity and innovations continue to flourish. So here are a bunch of questions that might appear on the jazz exam. I'll let you pause your recording right now and then I'll give you the answers. Okay, here are the answers from the screen. All the instruments listed under question number 1 are members of the brass family except for the saxophone. It has a reed and therefore it's a woodwind instrument. A riff is a single rhythm or 2 to 3 pitches that help structure a composition. You might get a listening example where I ask you to hear, for example, a blues progression. There really is no such thing as a syncopated progression, so you don't have to worry about that. Probably won't do the doo-wop progression, although you might know what it is, and probably won't do letter C either. Finally, a popular 4-note chord among jazz musicians is the 7th chord. That's not something we've talked about a lot, so it probably won't show up on the exam, but now you know. Still more questions that you might find on the exam. Go ahead and pause your video now, and then I'll be back in a couple seconds with the answers. Okay, back now. We're talking about cool jazz, and a good example of that would be Boplicity. A name of Brazilian music influencing U.S. jazz in the 60s, that would be bossa nova. Salsa would be Caribbean music, and samba was the basis of bossa nova, but didn't directly influence U.S. jazz. All the following are Miles Davis Jr. songs except for Straight Note Chaser, which is a Thelonious Monk song. Complex harmonies, rhythms, and fast tempos and small combos are found in bebop, not so much in cool nor in Latin jazz. Finally, Astrud Gilberto was the person who sang The Girl from Ipanema. 3 more possible questions for you. Go ahead and pause your video and consider the right answers, and then I'll give them to you. Okay, back now with the correct answers. The Cotton Club was that New York nightclub known for its black entertainers and white audiences. The name of the 1935 short film featuring Duke Ellington's orchestra was Symphony in Black. And stride piano is marked by alternating notes and chords in the bass and tenor registers, a little bit like this. Ostinato bass line is more of a boogie-woogie thing. And Fats Waller, although he was influenced by stride, really was much more of a swing pianist. That said, I probably wouldn't put Fats Waller as an answer for a question like this because I think it'd be a little bit too misleading. And a final screen of questions from our most recent studies. Here are the answers. Metheny is associated with the United States as well as South America. Watanabe associated with Japan. Makeba from South Africa. Reinhardt, Gypsy from Belgium. The second question on the screen I probably wouldn't put on there, but it's pretty obvious from Eldar Dyangarov's name that he was actually named after, or his stage name came after, the great guitarist Django Reinhardt. But again, that question is not going to be on there. Third, ornithology is a contrafact of how high the moon, and of course it's the Farmer's Market tune, How High the Loch, ornamentology, that is the tune in reference to which we talked about this. Hopefully you learned more on your listening guide about that. Finally, American jazz artist who died in 2007 would be Michael Brecker. Died unfortunately young, known for his playing of the electronic wind instruments. This concludes the video. Study hard, and I will see you for your exam. Good luck.